From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
A lot of our people our age have forgotten about this thing. So you find yourself continuously in discussions where you're involved in this educational process of reminding your brethren that, yeah, this actually happened to us, brother. This actually happened to our sister. Yeah. I mean, when you tell the average black kid in Moree that you were, locked up with a 3-foot fence, they'd say, "Oh, lolly, mate, you're joking. That never happened." Well, ask your pop, ask your nan, ask your mum and dad. At times it's very hard for us to even get the message across. But then the realisation that you were part of it and you were subjected to it, then you have to work out how you come to grips with that, whether you're going to play the victim thing for the rest of your life or you're simply going to open your mouth about it.
I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Today I had a conversation with Aboriginal elder and activist Lyall Munro. Lyall was a young Aboriginal boy in Moree when the bus came through town.
It was a ride which didn't so much break the shackles as it did open the eyes of Australia. When it came to Aboriginal people, racism and segregation was very much alive in country New South Wales.
They just wouldn't be allowed to work in the shops because they're not tidy enough. There's a lot of them here that's got good jobs in the cafes and that, and they just won't hold them.
In 1965, the great Charlie Perkins tries to bring these issues into the light.
A lot of Australians talk about, oh yes, we want to give the Aborigine a fair go, then it's full stop and it's usually forgotten. They never go on to say, look, we've proposed that we give such and such a scholarship to a number of Aborigines. Let us support Aboriginal organisation. Let us vote in favour of any legislation which allows for the elevation of the Aboriginal people. They don't do these things. They talk about it, but they never do it.
Many Australians didn't think there was discrimination in their country in the early 60s. The Freedom Ride was an attempt to show Australians what was really happening in their own backyards every day. Not only was there segregation, the state government was deliberately evicting Aboriginal people from their missions and stepping up its assimilation policies.
They think that the white man's higher than what they are.
What you just heard was media coverage of the 1965 Freedom Bus Ride. Lyall, tell me about your memories of that day.
Well, it was as clear in my mind as ever was. It was like it was yesterday. It is real history. It's something that happened. It's something that affected our lives at the time and still affects our lives. We'd heard at the time we were again still segregated on the mission or the Aboriginal Reserve, affectionately known as the Mission, under the notorious Aboriginal Welfare Act, which was amendment to the previous act of the Aboriginal Protection Act, which kind of kept our parents and our grandparents locked up on these out of sight areas, out of town, out of sight, and the respective policies at the time. I think under the Aboriginal Protection Act, it was a policy of we were expected to die out, and then the introduction of the assimilation program, where it was advisable for Aboriginal people to move into town and to live somewhat of their lives in the white community. It was a time of it was a very serious time for Aboriginal people because we'd still not yet been recognised as citizens of the country until the referendum in 1967, which is 2 years away. And we like to think that the Freedom Ride in Moree in particular was proved the catalyst for the oncoming referendum 2 years later. And it's interesting to note that 2 years' time we'll also commemorate the 60th anniversary of the 1967 referendum, which gave the Commonwealth Government the right to enact laws on behalf of Aboriginal people like everyone else. Prior to that, the states had control of Aboriginal people, and each state had their own restrictive legislation. I mean, remember the notorious one in Queensland was called the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Act, In New South Wales, the Act here was enacted the year after football was created here, in actual fact, in 1909, the year after rugby league. And Aboriginal people were subject out of town, out of sight, on places we referred to as concentration camps. Each mission had a manager. We had two managers because of the size of our mission, the population. We had a manager and an assistant manager. They had the right to control the lives of Aboriginal people under this particular act, the Aboriginal Welfare Act. But in Moree, we like to think we were double whammied because the council there, during these bad days, introduced a local bylaw to the Local Council Act, which restricted the presence of Aboriginal people right throughout the town, and it had particular restrictions on places like the town hall, which is the memorial hall, and they're kind of tied up in the failed landing in Gallipoli. We had all these kind of experiences going on that we tried to come to grips with. But this act said it all. This act was, in actual fact, if you look at the history of this act, you'll see that it was a template for the coming apartheid system that operated in Queensland and then moved to South Africa, I think, in the mid-60s. The restrictions from the town hall was based on the fact that we were deemed filthy. The particular restrictions referred to the dining room section of the town hall, all areas in town that served food. In fact, all areas of the town took advantage of this piece of legislation because it openly gave the town the right to openly discriminate against Aboriginal people. And that process continued until Charlie and the Freedom Ride arrived in 1965.
There's a lot to unpack with what you just talked about, and I don't think people really appreciate it, but what we're talking about is in your lifetime. So we're not talking ancient history here, we're talking in your lifetime, and you refer to the mission or the reservation where your movements were restricted. Just explain that to people, because I don't think people really understand. And you mentioned apartheid, and we all know what happened over in South Africa with that. But we had it here in this country in your lifetime, and I don't think people really appreciate it. So we'll just deviate a little bit from Charlie coming in with the bus, just what life was like for you growing up in a town like that where you're excluded from locations for no other reason other than the fact that you're Aboriginal.
Well, we weren't completely excluded. It became a bit of an embarrassment when we got to high school because we had the mission school that went to 6th class. It had a 3rd class accepted level of education.
Yeah.
But fortunately enough, our teachers breached the frontier with that and continued to treat our school like the normal schools. When we got to high school, of course, most of us were good swimmers. At the time, we swam raging floods at the age of 10 and 11 at the mission there. You know, bankers that came so fast before the dam system. If you dived in, you came up some 200 yards down the other side of the river, and then we'd have to run, 300 yards back up the river to dive in to be able to come out to where we originally dived from. So we were pretty experienced swimmers. We had some experiences there, like myself with about 6 of us one day. 2 young people were camping down from the mission. Their baby fell in the river and we ran down there and dived and pulled the baby out. Unfortunately, it was too late. But
right.
So we've had those experiences. Some of us were reaching into the high school swimming team. So every Wednesday afternoon at sport, I mean, most of us was encouraged openly to take cricket and Vigoro as a sport to avoid the embarrassment with the restrictions from the pool. We're restricted from the ovals too, but at the time that was kind of come and go kind of thing. You know, we could go there to play Saturday morning football, but after that we'd have to vacate the area in the town. But
Can you, like you talk, you lived it. It's hard for me to even comprehend it. So, you play football, and then well, you're not welcome back to hang around. You've served your purpose. You've played football, and then go back to the mission or the reservation. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, it's spelled out loud and clear with the returned soldiers. I mean, most of our soldiers, because they weren't citizens of the country until '67. The only way we could enlist, and all of our soldiers were volunteers. They were judged by that section of white blood within them, so they had that level of basically it turned out to be major investigations because they were collating all this information about particular groups of people. And we see in the case there where all our soldiers returned basically directly sent back to the missions. No recognition of their role that they played in all the wars. Our men volunteered with all the wars, from the Crimean War to the Boer War. The First and Second World War, the Korean War. Even the Vietnam War. But our people we weren't allowed, I mean, the same soldiers weren't allowed to drink in the RSL clubs at the time. There was no soldier settlement supported to our soldiers. There was no pension supported to our soldiers. In actual fact, the Aboriginal soldiers from Queensland, were paid no money to be involved in these international issues. So that was played out. That was the indicator that we weren't wanted. Living on the mission, some 3 k's out of town, and most missions are out of town, out of sight. We were segregated by a 3-foot fence with a barbed wire structure on the top of it. Now, I don't know whether people can understand, but when you can actually high jump that fence, and when you watch animals come and go freely, it starts putting crazy thoughts into your head, even though we were young people. And it was like, I mean, I had some personal experiences where I'd go up to the gate, the entrance to the mission, and sit on the gate and in the middle of the night and just wonder what's the problem, what's out there, what's on the other side of this. So at times I'd kind of sneak down the gate and stand on the other side of the gate, and I used to think to myself, well, what's the difference? However, that was the fence that restricted our presence on the mission. When we got to high school, some of us entertained the idea in trying out for the swimming team. So on Wednesday afternoon, for instance, we'd arrive at the pool in general sport. Aboriginal kids would be signalled out. We'd have to wash and scrub in the showers before we went to the pool. We had to have the trunks that the pool supplied. We couldn't wear our own swimming trunks. And then we were allowed to dabble around in one corner of the pool. This was for the duration of the afternoon, and when that 3 o'clock bell rang, then it'd come on the loudspeaker, all Aboriginal children removed themselves from the pool. That happened on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. However, we persevered with that because at least we were in the pool. Yeah. At least we were in the corner of the pool. And they stood there, the teachers, and kind of made sure we stayed in that particular corner. Now, the reasons for, and it will sound ridiculous, but it actually was the situation. The reason for no access to the town hall and the dining room sections was because we were filthy. The reasons for the barring of well, it's the biggest tourist attraction in Moree, the Moree Baths with its hot springs and stuff. The reason why we couldn't swim in the baths was because they feared young white girls becoming pregnant if young black men swam in the swimming pool.
Is that the logic?
That was the basics, the logic of their legislation. So we lived under that legislation. We could go into town. We had our own bus. The bus would pick us up, drop us into town for movies, and then back on the bus back to the mission. The same with shopping. Say, for instance, Saturday morning, all the parents, our mothers in particular, would get in the mission bus, drive into town, get their orders and all that sort of stuff, the food, and then on the mission bus back to the mission.
You mentioned the mission manager, or the manager on the mission. Who did that, and what was the role of a manager? Like restricting your movements and overseeing?
Well, under the Aboriginal Welfare Act, the local sergeant of the police station was actually the person who administered the act. Managers and their wives were hired in this system to control the lives of Aboriginal people on the mission. So to gain access to the mission, you first of all had to pull up and report to the manager. To leave the mission, you had to report to the manager. So I was fortunate enough to get a sports scholarship to a boarding school in Armidale, De La Salle College. It's now a co-ed college school. And I lived with all, the kids of the Scottocracy all around Moree. The racism there was not as bad as the racism outside. However, it's interesting to know that each mission, the road from each mission, leads directly to the railway station, which was convenient with the stolen generation people, because they were immediately taken from the mission by the manager straight to the railway station and down to Sydney. But the manager and their wives, the only medication we were administered by the manager's wife was stuff like mercurochrome and the ointment or whatever, stuff for skin rashes and stuff like that. But we'd always have to, because this segregation also applied to the hospital. In actual fact, the hospital segregation was the thing before Charlie and them arrived in 1965. It was McMaster Ward. It was the segregated section of the Moree Hospital where we were all born, and that we believe was the initiative for the introduction of that particular bylaw.
Right.
So we also had an assistant manager, and they were residents on the mission. The headmaster's premises, home, was a resident on the mission. So we had our own mission school for all the wrong reasons. I don't know why we're not allowed Aboriginal schools now for all the right reasons. But that was a system. It was hard trying to comprehend it, I suppose, when we became of age, but the scars and the experience and for one white man and his wife to have complete control of the lives of some 600 people, and this was the law. It wasn't an accepted practice. The racism around New South Wales at the time, it was an accepted practice. But in Moree, it was a legislative practice. They actually created the local bylaw. And it was surprising that after all that, the confrontations and that, when Charlie and them eventually left, when we convinced the mayor to rescind the bylaw, they then reintroduced the bylaw. So Charlie and them had to come back and demonstrate and do what they had to do then to have the bylaw finally scrapped forever.
Okay, let's talk about the Freedom bus ride and Charlie Perkins, and I think there was 29 students from Sydney University.
Yep.
And they travelled in rural New South Wales, visiting towns that they believed there was discrimination and racism in the town. And they went to, off the top of my head, Walgett, Taree, Bowraville, Coffs Harbour. You're right. Moree and different places or around the north and northwestern regions of the state. But the Freedom bus ride, people, we hear about it in America. I think most Australians would be more aware of what went on in the southern states of America with the Freedom bus ride. But this was very significant, and it changed the way people look at the situation and identify it. Can you talk about the bus ride and what it actually achieved? Where they went and what the purpose of the bus ride was?
Well, the only knowledge we had of the bus ride, the Freedom Ride, was from the odd home that had a television, and the ABC was talking about this bus that was travelling through New South Wales towns, and they were in Walgett at the time, and we saw the demonstrations there outside the RSL club and the swimming pool. On the way between Moree and Walgett, the bus was run off the road by white hooligans that basically chased them out of town. The bus was run off the road. It ended up in the gutter on the side of the road. It was almost, some describe it as almost being fatal, some of the students. It was quite a serious situation, but there was also a couple of carloads of young Murray men that also followed the bus to make sure that they were safe. They arrived in Moree. I think it's just so hard to understand that the reasoning and why the bus got there, but we were at home on the mission, and I think it was about maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We were just leaving the mission swimming pool, and this bus appeared at the gate. And it wasn't a tourist bus because we were quite used to tourist buses. They'd give us, chuck out sixpences and lollies and that type of stuff for us, the real tourist thing. It was, this bus had an aura around about it. And in anticipation, we were kind of amazed that this time of the afternoon that a bus was coming onto the mission that we didn't recognise. We recognised the school bus, the town bus, the tourist buses, that type of thing. But this bus kind of had this strange aura around it, about it. So we watched this bus travel slowly around the oval, coming to the manager's residence. They never pulled up at the manager's residence. Hello, what's going on here? Because everyone had to pull up at the manager's residence. And this bus pulled up and the doors opened, and there was this handsome black man came to the front of the bus and just simply said, "We'd just like to come in have a swim in the town bars." So 11 of us, of course, jumped on the bus, not knowing what was going to happen, of course. Drove to the swimming pool. Charlie and the students tried to negotiate, our entry. That wasn't acceptable because of the bylaw. They basically lived by this bylaw. Everything, their excuses for their racism was all tied up in this bylaw. But keep in mind, it was also a new kind of learning for us too.
Yeah.
I mean, being segregated and then being segregated from everywhere else, and I mean, your thoughts were segregated. Your whole being was segregated. It didn't. I suppose it never had the effect on us that it had on our parents and our grandparents, because with their generations, it was an accepted practice. This is how it is. This is how we are. Nothing is going to change.
Didn't question it.
We're subjected to this with it. No one's going to question it because of the authority. At the time, they were taking the kids away, all this type of stuff. The policies were there, integration, to smooth the dying pillow, quote, unquote. Then the assimilation program, which was entirely different based on, the need to assimilate and to be like other Australians. But what intrigued me was being in boarding school and coming home with me uniform on. And the bus would drop me at the mission gate. I'd get off the train, get a bus, a school bus would drop me off the mission gate. Then I'd have to report to the manager to come home. And when I was leaving, I'd have to report to the manager to go back to De La Salle. Yeah,
not your parents, the manager.
Yeah. So, and the managers had, their rule was strict. We had some managers that were quite acceptable. There were other managers that were tyrants and completely controlled the situation. They had the right to walk into your home and inspect it at any given time. They had the right to do whatever they wanted to do with your home. They could move you from your home. Those who accepted the dog tags, we call them, like the freedom papers that were given to particular Aboriginal people, that sort of stuff was in the process. Rugby league was starting in our communities, which was basically the way out for a lot of us young people.
Yeah.
Because our day was like, whilst the parents were shopping, we were playing Saturday morning competition.
Yeah.
And with that, we were allowed to go to the day's matinee after the football. But it was always back to the mission. There was always that bus or that car going back to the mission. There was always that gate closing behind us, and there was always that three-foot fence to contend with.
The way you're describing that, Lyall, it's not dissimilar to being in a prison. Yeah, someone that can come into your home at any time without reason, move you at any time without reason, allow you in or out under their control. Mm-hmm. It's, yeah.
And the only food source available to us was, there was a Lebanese family there called the Lahoods, who I would think that a lot of our people would have been in serious trouble if it wasn't for that family. They breached the restrictions and made sure that, they came down to the mission against the manager's wishes, or they'd park outside the fence against the manager's wishes, and they bought the necessary food like bread and butter and
you mentioned that the other day, and it's ironic, isn't it, that Lebanese immigrants are the ones that that treated you as humans.
And we're still very much associated with the Lahoud family, same as we are with the Perkins family, the two families that played a big role in a big part in our history in the town.
Yeah.
The managers at the time, the only employment our menfolk could get was in the farming industry for cheap wages and long hours and that type of stuff. Those men would disappear on Sunday, come home Friday. The only time we'd have access to our dads was on the weekend. And
the mums were...
We were given... those who didn't have employment, didn't have jobs, were then subjected to the manager's rations. And the rations came out every fortnight. The mission bell would ring from the manager's office. Everyone would turn up there to get a little box with flour, sugar and tea. Tripe was the only meat we ate. And that's basically how we lived until Charlie and the Freedom Ride arrived in 1965.
Do you think people are aware of what this situation was? Because I just hazard a guess here, but most people understand apartheid in South Africa and the shock horror about that, and international boycotts on the country for that. We've got this going on in our country. Do you think people are aware of the history of or understanding?
Well, sadly enough, the majority of Aboriginal people are not aware of this part of our history, and that was quite visible there the other night. So this history has been kind of shoved in the corner and the too hard basket, and where it's those who those of us who witnessed it. There's still hundreds of us alive from that system, and we still bear the scars. A lot of our young people, particularly in our town, a lot of the young people are now starting to come to grips with the fact that it happened. And of course, it's a lot of them are spellbound that this kind of thing actually happened to their parents who are still here.
Yeah.
And so keep in mind at the time, Moree was also divided up the community, out the black community. Like we had a place called the Mission, the middle camp, the top camp, and the common. Now the top camp were Aboriginal people that came in from Terry-I when they closed the mission there in I think 1923, 1924. Some of them went to Boggabilla and Mungandai and all around the place, but most settled in Moree. And the top camp was on the riverbank with all their huts and that type of stuff, with dirt floors and that. They had an invisible fence around them.
Yeah.
Because no matter where we were, all Aboriginal people were subjected to the Aboriginal Welfare Act. That was the controlling factor. And that stayed with us until 1967. And like I said before, that denied our whole existence. So up until 1967, no Aboriginal people in this country theoretically never existed.
You're considered a citizen now. Your parents or the people before you went through life not being considered a citizen and managed under the flora and fauna. So people talk about the 1967 referendum. What exactly did it mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically it gave the federal government the right to enact laws on behalf of Aboriginal people. The confusing part was that we were led to believe that it was the first time that Aboriginal people were allowed to vote. And that was the myth that accompanied that narrative all the way through until we'd realised ourselves.
Looking at the bus ride, the other towns, and it got a lot of media coverage at the time, and it was significant. And
it was pretty scary.
Yeah, well, it was scary in a lot of ways. It was challenging the norms. And as you know, I think you spent your lifetime fighting the systems on different things, and we'll talk about the impact that it's had on the direction of your life later. But do you think that was an awakening? Looking at it now, 60 years ago, the Freedom Bus Ride, and it was a significant part in the history of this country?
I don't think it was an awakening as such. I think it was a realisation and understanding that these things were going on, that we were aware of it, but we didn't kind of comprehend it. I mean, the learning process with us, other than the normal education process, was the way we lived, the things that were happening. You know, the mission bus came, took people to town. We'd go across to the dairy every morning with our little billy cans to get the milk. That was our only access to milk.
I understand what you're saying there, Lyall, because as a kid, what goes on is what happens. You don't question it.
Yeah,
well, you're accepting it. You mightn't understand it, but okay, this is just the way the world is.
Well, it was pretty kind of daring to, like, we'd have our little billy cans every morning, about 20 of us, and we'd all travel. But it became pretty dicey in wet weather because you had to dig your toes into the bank.
Not slip in.
And woe betide if you spilt that milk.
Yeah.
We had a system, if someone spilt their milk, then we'd all kind of top it up a little bit, to get it all level again. But no, spilling the milk was it was
You're in the shit if you
cardinal
spill the...
sin.
Yeah.
You were going to cop it, or
Okay.
someone was going to cop it. But but that was a normal system to us. It was no, we didn't think it was any different to what was going on in the town and around us. But the Freedom Ride also awakened some of the young white people too, because what was going on Saturday morning comp in particular was race relations. I mean, here's the town trying to come to grips with this important issue, and us young people were basically breaching all these frontiers. Saturday morning football. I mean, we've still got friends from way back then. I mean, why didn't someone ask us about how to deal with this race relations question in Moree?
Good point.
Maybe some of us kids would have had some answers. But sometimes it's even trying to explain to our own children about what happened, and then watching the impact, and when our young people start realising, like, far out, like, how did you survive? How did you, but we did. We've always survived for some reason or other. I mean, it was hard. It was always straight back to the mission. It was always from the mission to there, or straight back to the mission. But we survived. Somehow we've survived, but the impact of the Freedom Ride has still not been realised, simply because it's not a part of, for instance, the education curriculum in that part of that part of the country. No one talks about it. It's like if it's taboo, and Aboriginal people were taboo, but now their narrative, their stories are taboo, because it reconnects us with the way we were, and it was simply the only thing we can. And this is we've had these discussions with white people that we grew up with. It was kind of hard. It wasn't something to be looked at and to be examined for all its wrongdoings. It was something that just happened. We our lives were controlled, so it must have been good for us. If these decisions were made for us, they must have been decent decisions or whatever. But there was a lot of bad decisions. I mean, we weren't allowed information like when they took our brothers and sisters into the stolen generation system. We just realised they were gone. No one officially told us. So a lot of information was kept from us too by our parents, because of what it was and the effects that it would have had on us.
Yeah.
So at times our parents were shielding us all the time from these phenomena that were affecting our lives that we weren't aware of.
Yeah, and you can understand that as a parent, that it's something that you would do. But the fact that the significance of the Freedom bus ride, and you're saying that it's not something that people widely know, or the details of it, it's something that we all should know, shouldn't we? And when I say all, I'm talking everyone should know about it. It's part of the country's history.
Well, it should be part of the educational curriculum. Yeah. It's a history that, I mean, we're flooded with the white history. Yeah. But there's no history. There's nothing about us other than our existence. Sometimes it's hard to sit down and explain to your grandchildren. And they think, well, are you serious, Bob? Yeah, yes, I am. But again, a lot of that information was kept from us.
Do you think what happened with the bus ride, and you saw the results from it, or the interest, does that shape your life? Because you're described as an activist, and you've been at the forefront of a lot of change on Indigenous aspects and the way things are handled. Do you think that gave you a taste or shaped you in a direction?
Well, certainly gave us an insight into, the results of direct action.
Yeah.
At the time, the Aboriginal advancement groups were just forming, and in Moree, the Aboriginal Advancement Committee was, in actual fact, the Moree Mission School P&C Association. So that evolved into the political voice.
Yeah.
It, like, gee, to fathom it all, they're probably the bravest people I've ever encountered in my life, up until later on in life. But just to understand that a group of young white people, 30 of them in fact, students, with this young black radical, I mean, their lives could have been cut short directly coming out of Sydney, let alone going through places like Dubbo and Coonamble and Gillagumbo and Walgett, and then eventually coming to Moree. It took a lot of guts. It took a lot of intestinal fortitude. I mean, this area is still controlled by the Country Party, the National Party.
Yeah.
Blue ribbon seats right throughout northern New South Wales. Well, 74 years of my life. So, and a lot of the racism was part of the system. White people could do whatever they wanted with us.
Yeah.
There was no police there to protect us because there was no law there to protect us. So we had to be very careful, and at the same time being aware of it. And when we started being aware of it and being careful with it, to realise our parents, in all the difficulties they were facing, were still shielding us, from this bad stuff. And it wasn't a matter of our parents teaching us this stuff. It was a matter of us evolving and finding out ourselves, and it just became a part of our education. But at the same time, you're trying to come to grips with, it's still happening to us. Like, why doesn't anyone say something about it? Why doesn't someone do something about it? And it's never happened. And we have the same situation now with, I talk about the cancer-related deaths in Moree. No one seems to be interested. I mean, at the moment we're doing our history and eulogies in Moree, but it's another phenomenon that's affecting our groups and our families and our nations. But still in all, we seem to be always shoved in the hard basket part of the office, and so
it's a shame that we're sitting here talking about something that happened 60 years ago, and now 60 years later we're talking, and there's still issues that are of concern for you.
I shed a few tears there the other night. I mean, that town turned out against us. There was only us 11 kids and the students. There was no Aboriginal grown-ups or anyone. And to walk that gauntlet, that 20 yards from the pool door to the footpath, and to see Charlie being drug out that night, and the whole town, the local hotel across the road, just emptied. And these people came from everywhere, and there was just us and the students, 41 of us, and they chucked everything they could at us, bottles, rotten eggs, anything they could lay their hands on. It was quite a traumatising experience. I mean, the eldest in the bus ride, I think, was the sister Zona. She was 15. Our group was 13. And then my brother and them were 12 and 11. So we were basically kids. And to witness that, it still gives me creeps when I think about it. But it was quite a terrifying experience.
I would imagine that. I would imagine it was extremely terrifying. Like having that much anger and animosity directed at you for what? Well,
the safest place that night, ironically, was the mission, the mission gates. home again to whatever
Yeah.
we were already witnessing. So it was like from the frying pan into the fire kind of thing, and reversing all the time. So, but later on, I don't think it affected us that much until later on we started realising that's when it started that's when it started to kind of
Yeah. Well, yeah, my observation of and looking at the things that you've done with your life, it's instilled something in you. You got a taste for it, but if you want change, you got to push. And we're talking about that the other night, that nothing happens unless you push. And your life's sort of been shaped by that. I think it'd be fair to say.
very much so. Yeah, the fire in the belly.
Yeah.
That's Charlie's words.
Lit the fire in the belly.
I think we've all inherited that. Some of us in Moree, it shaped our future, particularly our politics. Basically, after freedom in '67, 4 years, 5 years, we all started kind of gathering in Sydney.
Yeah.
All talking the same language. And then from there, they say the rest is history. I mean, the formation of the Aboriginal infrastructures, land rights marches, the resistance, the reminder of, the past is back there, the particular acts that controlled us. And it needs to be discussed, particularly in country towns.
Yep.
Because the racism in country towns is basically, a big part of it is based on having people scared. Like, it's similar to pig chasing, and when animals are cornered, sometimes it's hard to. Sometimes when I'm sitting out talking with comrades, it's even hard for us at times to comprehend that we actually are still here, but we live that life.
Yeah.
And there's still reminders there, and it manifests in ways sometimes that it can be sudden. The reactions can take a lot longer. But the impact when it comes, wow,
I think the sad part with it, Lyall, is that you take your foot off the throttle and stop, and it reverts back. But you've set things in place, and when I say you, it's not just you, as you readily acknowledge. It's a whole range of people that have been fighting to make things a level playing field. Aboriginal legal services is one that comes to mind, and that's helping your people that find themselves before the courts and having someone that can properly represent them and not be disadvantaged. So, a whole range of things. I want to thank you for what you've done. Your name comes up in circles I mix with all the time, and you've thought of in a good way.
I've had some privileges, one could call privileges, all inspired by that particular night, that one night.
Yeah.
Being one of the organisers of the Aboriginal infrastructure exam and national bodies.
Yeah.
The visits to the representative voice to, for instance, the Subcommission on Human Rights there in Geneva in 83 and 84. Studied at a major international First Peoples program there in Strasbourg for 6 weeks. Met some interesting people. I've got some interesting friends. One comes to mind was Prince Mahato.
Sounds interesting.
He's now King Letsi of Lesotho.
Yeah.
He was an 18-year-old when we studied there at Strasbourg. Yeah, got some other interesting friends. Some are welcome, some are not.
Well, life's full of interesting characters.
Yeah. Been some interesting places, seen some interesting things. A lot of heartache at times, but the heartache's only there if you allow it. Some of the people, it takes a lot longer to realise that what we're talking about is what we witnessed. A lot of our people our age have forgotten about this thing.
Yeah.
So you find yourself continuously in discussions where you're involved in this educational program, this educational process of reminding your brethren that, this actually happened to us, brother. This actually happened to our sister. We're still alive. There's hundreds and hundreds of us still alive to tell the story. That never happened 70 years, 90 years ago. This happened in our lifetime, And it's so hard to tell the kids that a 3-foot fence.
Yeah.
I mean, when you tell the average black kid in Moree that you were, locked up with a 3-foot fence, they'd say, "Uncle Lolly, mate, you're joking. That never happened." Well, ask your pop, ask your nan, ask your mum and dad. So at times it's very hard for us to even get the message across. At times we succeed. Other times the pressures are so great that we haven't lost the battle.
Yeah.
The battle's just been kind of put off for a time, But then the realisation that you were part of it and you were subjected to it, that then you have to kind of work out how you come to grips with that, whether you're going to let that affect you the rest of your life, whether you're going to play the victim thing for the rest of your life, or you're simply going to open your mouth about it. I mean, we simply said no. I mean, all our struggles were based on, and Comroy people and Wiradjuri people, our lingo is tied up in no. We're known as the no people. But that simple word, and that's what everyone expressed. Just simply said no. Charlie and them expressed it, to the racism, no. We expressed it, no. It was all no's most of our lives, and that's how we got in the door. That's how our voice started to be. And then you had some great leaders, black leaders, that came out of our struggle, and a lot of them are still around.
I think the fact that you are telling the story and the way that you lived your life, and I understand that, no, I'm not going to accept that, is a very strong and powerful message. So that's why I wanted to get you on the podcast to put it out there and tell the people the story. Now, some people might go, "Oh, I'm not interested. It happened 60 years ago." But you're a living example of a person that's still alive, that still remembers it, and the impact it's had on you and the difference. And I hope people do understand our history, because the more I learn, the more I'm just, okay, it opens my eyes to a lot of things.
Yeah, well, it's like these people, I think they got the same problems. They want to go over and see other countries, and they haven't been in this country. They haven't seen this country.
Let's look in our own backyard. But look, let's finish up now again, and I think it just shows the character of you're on to talk about the Freedom Bus Ride, talking about issues from 60 years ago, and how you have to fight and learn to say no, and we're not going to take it. We're going to move forward, not let it break you. So thank you so much for what you've done throughout your life. Thanks for coming on to I Catch Killers, and it's been great to have a chat, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again a lot down the track.
It's a pleasure, Gary. Yeah.
Cheers.
It really is. Thanks a lot.